opinion, straw bales are a great medium to build in terms of the speed that the walls can go up and the insulation value and the look of them. We're going to be applying clay, a straw clay plaster to the inside. Straw's hydrophilic, which means it attracts water. It wants water to come to it, right? Cement is less hydrophilic than straw. So and the way cement works, and if you ever go and see a slab around the area, which is why we put our straw bales on a bottom plate, they act like a big sponge. Cement, through capillary action, because it's full of tiny little holes, will actually suck water up. And where straw bales are, and there's so much heat, and if you imagine it's like a big sponge, that'll suck water up into the bales as well. So because obviously the straw is more hydrophilic. Clay and lime are actually more hydrophilic than straw. Clay and lime want water more than straw does, so they'll actually draw water out of a bale towards the render and slowly evaporate it out that way. So if you've got any moisture in your bales, they'll do that. If you cement render it through that same capillary action, it'll go in towards the straw, but because the straw is more hydrophilic than the cement, it won't actually let it get back out. So what we're going to do is apply first up a clay slip, which is just a pure clay. And get it as fine as you possibly can. Sieve it through a sieve like this to get a good clay slip, otherwise you wind up with lots of chunks and stuff in it, which makes it harder to work. So basically the way to test a good clay slip is to dip your finger in it. If it hangs onto your finger like that, then that's a good clay slip. What the clay slip's doing is it's grinding clay into the straw. So you get a brush and you drag it up and down on the straw, and it grinds that clay water into the straw, which dries quite quickly. And as clay wants to find clay, it goes rock hard, it wants to bind to itself. Each time you put another layer on, you add more clay slip. It's basically like a glue between layers and stops an onioning effect. Can you see there's a hole there I can stick my hand into? Okay, and if there's one there, there's sure enough going to be one down there too, because that's the corner of a bale. All right, so what I want to do is just get a bunch of finish kind of straw like this, dunk it into my clay slip, boil it up, and shove that in. So fill that up until it's about, I don't know, maybe an inch or so away from the surface of the straw. And then grab a couple of handfuls of this and just fill those holes up. And do that as you're applying your clay slip, because that's when you'll see them. Earth plaster is the same as any other rendering material. You've got a binding agent, same as cement if you were doing a cement render, and that's your clay. So your clay is your binding agent. You've got an aggregate, which is the same as any other cement, sand, and you've also got this fibre. Having this straw in there acting like a fiberglass goes all sorts of different ways, and it eliminates the cracking. If you work a lot of see this mesh over here that we've got, that renderer's mesh? If you work a heap of that into it, it just basically creates a barrier that all that straw at that point stops and then starts again on the other side of that mesh. So you can't actually get that keying in of that straw. So that's why you don't need that, and that's quite expensive, that stuff. Whereas on the outside here where we're liming, we will use that because it doesn't have the straw in it. I generally put in around about 3/4 of a bucket to 2/3 of a bucket of water into this brew that I'm going to do. So I'll tip that in there first. So 1.5 of these fellas, a 3 mil sand. One and a half clay, 1 sand. I'll turn it up onto the mat. And you can see every now and then you'll get a clumpy bit come to the top. If you just jump on top of it with this thing, it'll knock it out. We just put a handful into the bottom of the bucket, get the whippersnipper going onto it. Just make sure you don't get any baling twine in amongst your little handful, because that is a bit unfortunate. So 1.5 of these fellas. And again, you don't have to be too exact with the straw because it's not going to hurt if there's a tiny little bit more in there. The other way you can mix is, you know, four people or 3 people or something stomping around in there until you can't see any more straw.
The Zulu make the kraals in South Africa and Kenya out of cow dung and straw. I can categorically state there are no cow pats in this render.
We grind it in with the heel of our hand first, and that makes sure that you get a nice bind into the straw. This is basically what we call a scratch coat or a discovery coat. Generally work from the bottom up so that each layer of render's got something to sit on, and then I can just force that up onto there and start to build it out. Well, you build that out about 20 mil. So you can see I've got a leading edge there now. I'm ready to put plaster on there. So I can force that upwards first, bring it down to fill that up. And then because that was my governing point, I bring that across so it's nice and straight, and that's my new governing point there. So then I apply to there and work my way backwards to the place that I'm already happy with.
It feels so nice to work with.
We just don't get to play with mud pies.
The beauty about clay render is more so than lime render and more so than, or especially more so than cement render, it's so easy to fix. It's so malleable and so easy to wet down and reapply that it's a really great way to render your home. They're just drying cracks, and that's actually a really good sign. That means you've got a good quality clay because it's doing that, and that actually helps key in the next coat as well. See that crack and that crack there, and probably that one there. The reason it's doing that is because the hole hasn't been filled probably enough as what I was showing you in there. And they just belt that in, and you can see it disappearing in there a little bit. So that's all filling up that hole now. And that render will still be pretty wet in behind it. So tap it in till it won't go in any further. So just fill that fella up. You'd never know it was there.